Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you by Bet365. My name is Dave Quadrelli. I'm joined by Harman Dial, and this is Canucks Conversation, and we're going to talk today about them Vancouver Canucks. The Florida Panthers are on another level. We're going to talk about that, I'm sure, and anyone else. But my, oh my, was it a banger of a piece dropped at The Athletic today by your colleague, Thomas Drance. And that's going to be really the number one topic we talk about today is just what a home run offseason for the Canucks looks like. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds because we're going to dive into it more and we're going to preface it all. But give me your elevator pitch of what a perfect offseason looks like for the Canucks.
A miracle. Like, if we're being honest, the needs really start with not just adding one top line caliber sort of forward, but probably two, and ideally one of them sort of being a bona fide star. That's the biggest difference when you compare the Canucks to the other remaining conference finalists, particularly the Oilers, the Stars, the Panthers, the teams that we look at this point as actually having a shot at winning the Stanley Cup. And those are some of the hardest, most expensive pieces to acquire in an offseason if they even become available in the first place. So it's going to require outside of the box thinking. It would require giving up a lot of premium assets. This is going to be a huge undertaking for management this summer, is finding a way to graft more elite forward talent. And the crucial distinction is it's not just as simple as adding a second line center and one more second line caliber winger. And now all of a sudden you've got a top six forward group that can do some damage. If Elias Pettersson also bounces back, their needs extend a lot deeper than that. And I think one potential takeaway is for this management group is it shouldn't necessarily be about just finding a second line center. It should be about finding an elite forward in general, right? Of course, in some capacity, they're going to have to address the 2C need, but they just need a star forward in general, whether it's on the wing, whether it's, preferably at center, but we know how hard it is to acquire star centers. That's the biggest sort of takeaway from that exercise.
Okay, you went over 30 seconds, but I forgive you because we'll break it down more. But before we do that, I want to tell you about our Super Chat charity sponsor this season, the BC Mental Health Foundation. You want to make sure your question or comment gets on the show? Hit us with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat go to the BC Mental Health Foundation, changing the face of mental health and addiction by supporting breakthroughs in care, public understanding, research, and knowledge exchange. And this opening segment of ours, I'm very excited about today's show. I'm not going to lie. Our opening segment is brought to you by the Vancouver Whitecaps, who extended their club record MLS unbeaten run to 13 matches across all competitions. They also extended their unbeaten run in MLS play to 8 matches, which is now tied for the second longest unbeaten run in MLS play. Whitecaps FC are headed to Mexico and will play in the 2025 CONCACAF Champions Cup final on Sunday, June 1st against Cruz Azul. This is the first time in club history Whitecaps FC has reached the final, and just the third time a Canadian team has reached the final. If you want to go, enter for a chance to win 2 tickets, 2 flights, 2 nights at a hotel, and 2 jerseys. Check out whitecapsfc.com/final. Okay, so I talked about it. This piece from Thomas Drance over at The Athletic. Really good. The title, Canucks Offseason Needs, How Vancouver Measures Up to the NHL's conference finalists. Now, we look at this chart that has been provided to us and we see a net rating. I'm assuming this is using Dom's model.
Yes.
Can you explain to me and the listeners what net rating means and how we're supposed to read this graph or chart, whatever this is?
Yeah, so it's essentially an all-in-one kind of war model. It takes into account a variety of metrics such as point production, defensive impact, play driving ability. It accounts for a player's quality of teammates, quality of matchups, and it estimates in one single number a player's overall value. Now, it's far from perfect. There are sort of flaws that come with a model like that, but the point is to try and holistically capture a player's value as best you can in one number.
And we look at it, we see that the net rating of all 4 teams, and I'm assuming this is an average, of course, is 61.2. The Canucks are 19.5. That tells me that it's going to be a bit. It's going to take a big increase to get to a number like 61.2. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, hard-hitting journalism there. Love that observation. Yeah, I mean, part of what we also need to take into account is net rating can fluctuate quite a bit year over year. So last year, for example, Dom's model and net rating loved the Canucks because they were coming off of year prior where they had such a successful regular season, went to Game 7 of round 2, and so there were so many players on that roster where their net rating just sort of boosted a lot, like Besser, Garland, JT Miller, obviously when he was on the roster at the start of the season. Whereas, coming off a down year like this, you even take into account a guy like Dakota Joshua, their net ratings have all sort of dropped. Elias Pettersson, obviously. So to some extent, you look at, all right, 19 compared to 61, and you're like, this is, it almost sounds ridiculous, the gap. Now, there is, you would hope, some level of internal bounce back for guys like Pettersson, like Joshua. But even with that taken into consideration, and the possibility that some of the younger prospects like DPD, Mancini, Lecker-Mackey, who obviously aren't included in that exercise because this is simply looking at the roster that the Canucks sort of finished with this season. Even with all of that taken into consideration, there's a lot of work needed to be done for the Canucks to sort of get to that level. And I'm going to be honest, we're going to talk about, home run offseason. I don't know if I see a path for the Canucks to become realistic cup contenders next season. I just don't see it. I can see a path for them becoming a good team and perhaps replicating, if everything goes right, what the Washington Capitals did this year, what the Canucks themselves did.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can they not get back to the 23-24 Canucks in one off season?
Yeah, maybe if everything breaks right, but that's the absolute 99th percentile outcome, which shows
swing for it.
Yeah, and the point is, look at how many times Florida, Dallas, Edmonton, and Carolina have made the conference finals in recent years. It's so hard to just, like, this idea that anything can happen in the playoffs. Yeah, anything can happen in the playoffs, maybe in round 1. But at a certain point, you just don't see many Cinderella teams these days making an unlikely run to the conference final or the Stanley Cup final. If you want to do damage in the playoffs, which should be the goal, you actually need to be an elite team. And the path for the Canucks to get to that standpoint, I'll be honest, it's going to require some extraordinary luck because I don't know that they can turn it around in 12 months.
They're going to try. So what does a home run off season look like? Look, when Drance broke this down in the piece as well, one thing he talked about was you need a Pettersson bounce back, which is the subject of our poll question, which we'll get to soon. You need that to happen. That's already something that isn't a guarantee. And then you also need to go get an elite forward, like you said, not just a center, and another top line center as well. You're going to need like a second line center behind that elite forward, but you're going to need an elite forward. You're also going to need to replace Brock Besser and Pia Suter if he walks as well. At some point, they're not going to be able to do everything. The nightmare scenario for me, Harm, is if they do manage to get those two big pieces out of the way, the elite forward and the top line center, and then Elias Pettersson doesn't bounce back, because that's enough to derail everything next season, even if you go hit on those pieces.
Yeah, unquestionably. I think the best way to look at how drastic the Canucks needs up front is to go back to the playoffs last year, where we were looking at this forward group and going, oh, they still need one more sort of like first line difference maker. And that was when they still had JT Miller. That was when they still had Brock Besser, obviously, who is not under contract for next season. So you remove Miller from the equation, you move Besser, and even when you have those guys, you already needed a guy. You're talking about like 3 like really high-end forwards that you sort of need to add to your roster in order to reach a level where you have the type of forward group that can actually do damage in the playoffs. And I mean, the interesting takeaway too is when you look at these conference finalist teams, they're largely doing this damage on the back of their forward groups more than their defense, right? You look at the Edmonton Oilers, they don't have Matthias Ekholm right now. That blue line on paper isn't great. I mean, they have some solid players like Wallman and Bouchard obviously is incredible offensively despite his, defensive flaws. But that blue line, you don't look at it and immediately go, oh, that's championship caliber. But they have McDavid and Draisaitl, and right now they have incredible forward depth, so they're still finding ways to win games. The Dallas Stars, they beat the Colorado Avalanche, a team that around the league many people looked at as an elite opponent, despite no Mira Heiskanen, right? Yeah, they had Harley, they had Lindell, but afterwards it was such a patchwork group on the back end. Yet they found a way to win because top to bottom they have one of the deepest forward groups in the NHL. Plus the Mikko Rantanen addition has been such a game changer. I mean, you look at the Stars lines right now. I'm looking at Daily Faceoff. On paper, their fourth line wingers right now are Jamie Benn and Evgeny Dadonov. Like, that's ridiculous. The amount of depth that they have, the amount of difference makers offensively. And then you sort of look at the Florida Panthers. Brad Marchand would probably be the Canucks' best winger right now. He's on Florida's third line. And yeah, Florida's blue line has chipped in with a lot of offense on this playoff run. But over the last couple of years, it's been a blue line that most people on paper wouldn't look at and go, that's an elite group. Because, I mean, Forsling's a great player, but he's a waiver wire pickup. Like, they've just become a team where their environment unlocks the best version of a lot of these defensemen. Like, Nico Mikkola has become like a top 4 minute muncher. In St. Louis, he was a number 60 man. When the Rangers acquired him at the deadline a couple of years ago, he was a number 60 man. So they're not like, yes, their blue line's good, but these teams are largely doing this on the back of their forward groups, where if you were to just rank all 32 teams forward groups this year, Edmonton, Florida, and Dallas would all rank top 5, if not those being the top 3 teams. Whereas defense, it wouldn't necessarily work out that way. And when you look at why the Carolina Hurricanes have been demolished, it's because they don't have the same level of elite star difference makers at the forward position.
Another thing to consider when we talk about this and this exercise that was done over at The Athletic is that the Canucks have Quinn Hughes, and that's something teams don't have. Teams don't have a Quinn Hughes. There's a few teams out there that have their own elite defensemen, but that is a serious advantage for the Canucks. Again, nothing earth-shattering going on here, but worth mentioning when we're talking about how tough of an offseason it's going to be. Now, we talked about needing that second line center, needing that elite forward. Could Morgan Geekie be an example of a guy you could go out and try and acquire? Again, an RFA this year, but coming off a really big year where he scored 33 goals in Boston. The reason I bring him up is because there is multiple people in the chat right now bringing up Morgan Geekie, who, again, I didn't even realize this. He signed for $2 million in Boston. What a great return on investment. I'm sure the Bruins made the playoffs and had a great year. I kid, of course, but 33 goals, 24 assists for Geekie through 77 games. That's a career year in every sense of the word for the 26-year-old.
I don't like the idea of going after Morgan Geekie. I like the idea of going after Morgan Geekie when he was unqualified by Seattle and when Boston signed him for $2 million. That's when Seattle didn't qualify him, I was all over him as like, that's a good target for a team. I sort of wrote a piece in the aftermath sort of breaking down what I thought were some of the best contracts signed, and Geekie was among there. But that's the point, is the time to acquire Morgan Geekie is when he wasn't qualified by the Seattle Kraken. It's not now that he's had this career 33 goal season and he's looking for a substantial raise as an RFA. I mean, he shot 22% this year.
Which, little Ryan Donato vibes.
Yeah, exactly. And not to mention, the big key is he was staple to David Pastrnak. And David Pastrnak has had 3 straight 100-point seasons. Pastrnak is doing all the heavy lifting on that line. Geekie's a good player. He's got a solid shot. He's a big body that can win battles along the boards. But he's a complimentary winger who just happened to pop off in a huge way because he played with David Pastrnak on a Bruins team that has awful winger depth. And so somebody had to have top line opportunities. Somebody had to score goals on that team.
Okay, so the exercise really is go out and acquire the next, I don't want to say Ryan Donato, but the next Morgan Geekie, the next Ryan Donato. Like that's what it comes down to for the Canucks. That's what I'm going to talk about when I give my take of what a home run offseason is. It's that, yeah, you need that elite forward. You need that top 2 center. but you're not going to go trade for an established one. I don't think you could. It's going to cost you a lot, but I think that's where part of the puzzle needs to be addressed in free agency, if you ask me, because and again, the management group already talked about how trades is probably going to be the avenue they have to go down. Like, we're not talking Sam Bennett. We're not really talking Mitch Marner in this equation as well. We wrote a piece about John Tavares today over at Canucks Army. But even if you go sign a bigger fish, even if you go sign John Tavares, like, you're still going to need to address the rest of that puzzle through trades. The way I'd put it is, like, the Canucks are probably going to be able to make one free agency signing that can help address one of these needs. And then the other ones are going to have to be addressed via trade route. Now, the reason I bring that up is because the Canucks need to hit on one of these guys. It needs to be an undervalued player. It needs to be someone in a situation where, and this is if you're trading them, they're getting fourth line minutes right now. Again, we've talked about Marco Rossi, and you bring him to your team and he excels. And I'm not bringing up Marco Rossi as an actual example. It's just one that we've talked about recently, but like, that's what you need. And again, it goes back to that conversation we had a couple of weeks ago about the Washington Capitals and what they did and how they hit on a few guys that were, again, not playing roles that they were going to end up playing in Washington, and they excelled in those roles in Washington. Like, the Canucks need that. And part of that comes down to luck. I get that, which is why it is a true rabbit out of the hat if the Canucks can kind of hit on all parts of this home run off season. But that's something that's going to have to happen, is you're going to have to go find one of those undervalued guys. And I'm not just talking about, oh, go find the next Dakota Joshua, go find the next Kiefer Sherwood. Like, those guys are great stories. The Canucks don't need more third line wingers that, you know, like Joshua and Sherwood. The example there is that they're like fourth line press box guys that the Canucks turned into third line, maybe second line on a great day wingers. You need more than that. Like, you need guys that are playing on third lines right now, playing on second lines right now, that can excel and take that step to the first line potential.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is I don't think you can moneyball your way into solving those needs, because this Canucks team, like, you can moneyball your way into finding sort of complementary guys and players that can make an impact in the middle of your lineup.
You can maybe replace Suter and Besser with those guys.
Exactly. But you're not finding like a first line guy out of nowhere unless you get really lucky, like the Panthers did with Carter Verhaeghe, right? Like, that would be the equivalent. But how many times does that happen? I mean, I can't really think of another example over the last number of years.
Real quick, like Carter Verhaeghe, the way he got to Florida, I don't know. I don't know if anyone's talked about this, but I've been curious to kind of explore what the spending habits of the Florida Panthers were at the time. You know what I mean? Like, everybody, because wasn't Verhaeghe part of the 2020 crop in like that October free agency pool? Okay, here's the take. I don't know if I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. In my mind, if the Panthers weren't located in Florida, where we know COVID didn't exist, all the other teams had their tap shut off because they weren't sure about gate revenue. We know the Canucks absolutely botched that offseason because the taps were shut off. Like, does Florida get their hands on Verhaeghe if there's no COVID? I'm going to say no. Maybe this sounds a little conspiracy theorist, but do you think I'm wrong here? Because they had gate revenue that whole time.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. That was a special advantage for them that summer, where they went out and signed a bunch of guys that on value contracts at a time when other teams weren't spending. So it was absolutely a benefit. But that's the point, right? Is you don't have many Carter Verhaeghes that just pop up, where that year in Tampa, he was sort of a depth forward, only played 8 playoff games when the Lightning won the Stanley Cup, hit the free agent market after only scoring 13 points in 52 games. Panthers sign him, and immediately he's a near point per game winger. Like, that rarely happens. And so realistically, it's going to have to be done where you're paying, market value. And that isn't to say you can't find somebody who hasn't hit their ceiling yet, and that you have to pay market value. But the point is, like, the baseline of the player you acquire has to be higher, and then you're hoping for additional upside beyond that. And, one example I brought up a lot of times is Alexis Lafreniere. Like, that's a good example. He wouldn't come cheap if the Rangers shop him, but if he is available for whatever reason, if the Rangers have sort of soured on him, coming off a down year. He's a guy that I look at and go, scored 28 goals just a year ago. Struggled this past season, but everyone in New York was underperforming. Capo Caco found a new gear once he left that environment with the Rangers. We know that he has that elite pedigree. When the Rangers were in the playoffs a year ago, he was one of their best play drivers, one of their best forwards overall. That's a type of, when we talk about a home run, that's a type of swing where if you acquire him and he pops off and becomes a near point per game guy, that's a kind of home run that this team needs to hit, especially because unique circumstances where a player like that, a lot of early years in New York, he didn't get consistent top six opportunity. He has never really gotten consistent first unit power play time. So it'd be a player like that as far as a home run move to solve one of those holes as far as the star forward is concerned.
And I think he falls into that category of what I was saying, where it's like, yeah, he can take that step and be even better than he was. Again, a big part of all of this is that Elias Pettersson also needs to bounce back. We're going to get to that in our poll question, but people are throwing out names. I want to talk about it. Also, Karn in the chat said the Panthers were spending a bleep ton in 2020 and 2021. That's how they got Forsling, Verhaeghe, and others. And then Conversation said Karn listened to Canucks Talk today. So I'm assuming Drance threw out a similar take on Canucks Talk today, or Jamie, or whoever's on Canucks Talk today. Is Drance still on vacation? No, he wrote yesterday.
No,
he's back.
He's
okay.
back.
Okay. Dr. Haas, regular listener to the show, said, "What about Rossi from the Wild? I've given more thought to Marco Rossi. Disagree with me if you want, Harm. Too small. You can't have a 1-2 center punch, if you can even call it that, of Elias Pettersson and Marco Rossi. Maybe I'm crazy. Too small. Don't like it."
I don't like it, but there's not going to be a perfect solution out there. And when you're searching for like a bona fide top six center, there are a lot of boxes that Rossi checks. And I say this as somebody that is a little bit skeptical of the size, that is a little bit skeptical of how much of a play driver is he actually on his own, especially if he's not going to have the opportunity to play with a Kaprizov or a Boldy caliber of line mate in Vancouver. But he's 23 years old. He's coming off a 60-point season. Like, how many 23-year-old top six centermen scored 60 points? And at 23 years old, he may not have reached his prime yet in terms of not just the point production, but the play driving element as well. How many of those types of players are out on the market right now?
That's fair.
So like, he's somebody you have to consider.
So there's concerns about the size. Maybe I'm buying into them a little more. Again, 5'9", 182 is what he's listed at, for those wondering why I'm bringing it up. Not that there's anything wrong with being 5'9". I'm going to throw that out there too. But I don't play in the NHL. I'd be okay with it to some extent. And you do make a good point that he is part of the ideology that you need to take a swing and hope that a guy, like I was saying earlier, you need to hope that a guy can go from being a second line center to being a first line center, because then all of a sudden, with an Elias Pettersson bounce back, you've got two first line centers, which makes you a really deep team and gives you another advantage over the competition. I do worry about that size. The point you're making, though, that there's going to be flaws with every player, and you're going to have to at some point just kind of live with some of the cons on some of the targets that you go after. I'd be curious what the package for Marco Rossi looks like, because maybe that's a con, maybe that's a pro. Well, I just think there's better targets.
I asked an exec about Rossi, and he said, yeah, those concerns and flaws are there, but that may be part of the reason why the trade market for Rossi may not be as robust as the Minnesota Wild imagined. So that may be a reason that, yes, there will be teams interested in Rossi because teams are always looking for centers, but maybe the cost isn't as expensive as you expect it to be, and that actually works in your favor, right? So it's all cost dependent, right? I don't know Marco Rossi's precise sort of trade value, but if there's an opportunity to scoop him at a reasonable price because other teams are scared off by the size, then I'd at least consider it. I wouldn't just immediately cross off his name on my list. I don't look at him as perfect guy. And ultimately, if you went into the playoffs with a 1-2-3 of Pettersson, Rossi, and Hedl, I think you'd get murked. Like, I think you'd get murked physically. But this isn't even a playoff caliber team right now. So we can't even we almost can't even talk about, oh, what would happen if they got into the playoffs, because they're not even that good that we could look at them and go, oh, they're definitively a playoff team. Those are like that type of problem is a rich man's problem.
Dean in the chat here said a line of Höglander, Rossi, and Garland would be funny. Just saying, yeah, I like that. I like that idea. Remember when Höglander, Sheldon Dries, and Connor Garland made the shortest line in the NHL?
I want to forget the days when Sheldon Dries, nice guy, but I want to forget the days when the Canucks
Nice
had to use him
guy.
as a third line center.
Has Sheldon Dries ever been on the show? No, I don't think he has. He's got a good smile. Sheldon Dries is a nice smile. He's a nice guy. Okay. I'm getting off track here. Okay, Lafreniere. Yeah, a lot of people talking about Lafreniere in the chat. I think he might be the guy that fits the bill of what I just said, of not undervalued, but can take a step when he comes to your team. Almost like JT Miller, right? Remember when the Canucks traded for JT Miller and it was okay, he's going to take a step because he's getting increased increased opportunity here. That's what you need. You need to get one of those guys. And again, you brought it up, Harm. You're going to have to trade for that guy. You're not going to go mine that on the open market. That's not going to happen unless it was 2020. You might have been able to, like the Florida Panthers did. They're going to have to go trade for that guy. So I think that's part of a perfect offseason. Now, we've established that they're going to need to go out and get some pieces. But arguably the biggest part of this offseason for the Canucks, not offseason, the season ahead, is an Elias Pettersson bounce back. Let's get to our poll question and see how people are feeling about an Elias Pettersson bounce back. Our poll question is a presentation of Pacific Toyota dealers who want to tell you about the 100% electric Toyota BZ4X, an SUV packed with plenty of space. The BZ4X can handle any terrain, taking you from the city to the slopes. It's backed by the peace of mind that comes with knowing you're driving a Toyota. And if you're driving a BZ4X, you get access to HOV lanes, even if you're driving alone. When you choose the BZ4X, you can get a $5,000 incentive, and now you can finance a 2025 BZ4X LE all-wheel drive from 0.99% APR for 36 months. Visit shoptoyota.ca, your local Pacific Toyota dealer. Today, our poll question: how confident are you in Elias Pettersson bouncing back next season? The majority of Canucks fans saying optimistic. 37% say optimistic. 28% say confident. 25% say not holding my breath. And 10% say not going to happen. I'm somewhere between optimistic and not holding my breath, to be honest with you, Harm.
I think cautiously optimistic would be the best way to sum up the way I'm feeling around Pettersson. I expect him to be better next season, but I also expected him to be a lot better this past season. After how much he struggled down the stretch and in the playoffs, I felt very confident that he was going to bounce back this past season, and he didn't. It's all going to come down to how quick does his skating look? Does his shot look like it has its normal velocity again? And hopefully he's just able to turn the page and enter the season.
Sorry to cut you off, but that's part of the concern. That's part of the concern for me, is that you just brought it up, the shot velocity, the skating velocity. Do you remember when that genius reporter, asked him about that at year-end media avails and he had no answer? That's concerning. Like that's concerning to me. And not to rehash an old conversation that we had, Harm, but that's why I'm closer to the not holding my breath, because it's like, I'm not sitting here and I'm not going to come out and say like, oh, is he taking it seriously? I'm just like, does he know what's wrong? Does he? Like that's a fair question to ask, I think.
Maybe, but to some extent, I think if he gets his stuff together this offseason, if he really trains hard, and whether you buy his angle or not that the knee tendonitis affected his offseason training last summer, or management's belief that he didn't prepare himself properly, either way, I think there is some understanding that he didn't enter last season in the best shape to take advantage of, the physical tools and athleticism that he has. You're hoping, and again, it's not a guarantee, obviously, but you're hoping that with a normal, healthy offseason, he can get back to, that shot and that speed looking like it typically has in years past. And let's be honest, if you're looking at the other side of the equation too, how many 26-year-olds just see their shot velocity and their skating speed randomly drop off?
Mm-hmm.
I would lean towards thinking that'll come back just because it's pretty, I don't want to say unprecedented, but I can't think of many examples where at 26 years old, a guy's skating speed and shot velocity just falls off a cliff, and that's the level that he's going to be at forever.
That's fair. That's fair. And there's a reason for optimism as well. So we'll see. It's a question that's going to get asked. It's one that isn't going to get answered until next.
Well, it's also it's not as nuanced as is he going to bounce back or not. It's what level is he going to bounce back to?
If he's like an 80 to 90 point guy, they're happy.
Right, but what if he's coming off a 45 point season? So it's like a 68 point season is technically bouncing back.
No, okay. I should have made it clear in the poll question then. That is not what I mean. That is not what I mean.
Well, that's what I'm saying is
this guy's going to be at or very, very close to being a point per game center. He's a number one center. He's your first line. Well, no, you're paying him $11.6 million. Isn't enough.
I fully agree with you, but there is that, like, that's a possibility that he's better, but that he doesn't return to the level that he's been in previous seasons.
Not good enough.
I fully agree.
46 points next season, nobody's gonna be sitting here saying, "Oh, at least he got more points." No.
Well, okay, if he hit like 73 points,
bad,
right?
Awful. Get off my team.
I agree with you, but are like, we can't just sit here and think there's only one of two possibilities, that he's gonna be a 45 to 50 point season like he was. 45 to 50 point player like he was this past season, or he's going to bounce back all the way and be a 90 to 100 point player. Like, there could very reasonably be a middle ground. In fact, I would bet on the middle ground. Like,
I would bet against the middle ground. I would say it's one or the other. I would
say,
like, it's either, okay, Jacob, write this down. It's either going to be, and obviously the big caveat is if he misses a bunch of games, it's a little different, but that's obvious. It's either going to be like he's under 50, 55 points, 55. Let's set it at 55. He's either under 55 or over 75. I don't think there's.
Oh, come on. You said, okay, fine. Yeah, but you set the bar at 75. Like, that's reasonably. If you set it at like 82,
80. Sure.
Point per game. We'll set it at point per game.
Right.
Point per game. I would say it's not in between that. It's one or the other.
It could be. Why couldn't it be in between that?
I don't think it's going to be. I think he's either going, because I think he's either going to be ineffective like he was this year, which would result in him posting under 55 points. Or what did I say? What did I say? 55 or 60? What did we say?
50. We'll bump it up. We'll bump it up to 60. 60 to 82 feels like a pretty fair range for the point that you're trying to make.
I don't think it comes in between that, Harm. I really don't. I think it's one or the other. I think he's either going to, if that shot velocity and that skating velocity, as you pointed out, if that returns, like, why can't he be the guy? Why can't he go out and he doesn't have to get 100? Let's not forget this guy posted 102 points in a season. He doesn't have to do that again. But can he get back to point per game? Let's also not forget that, like, more often than not in his career, he's been a point per game guy. He's been at that level. So I'm sorry, this idea that there's an in between where it's like, oh, Pettersson logged 70 points. I don't think it happens because I think he has that level of effectiveness just far beyond that, and we've seen what ineffective PD looks like. I don't think there's an in between here. I really don't. I know it might sound weird, but I don't. I really, really don't.
I would disagree. I think I'm not saying I expect it to be in the middle ground or that it would be acceptable, but why can't he? He's over his career, he's been so inconsistent, and we know that he looks, at least to me anyway, the type of player that once he picks up a knock or a bruise, that type of like injury that like you can kind of play through but affects you a little bit, it seems to affect him a lot more than it does other players. So over the course of an 82 game season, we've seen, even in the middle of even over the course of a season, we've seen him flip-flop between, like, for half the season he looks lifeless, and then second half of the season he's dominant, elite, looks unstoppable. So to some extent, Pettersson has I don't want to say always, but we've seen him, like, he's been volatile. He's been up and down. So within a season, why can't he also potentially be volatile?
I don't think it's to the extent, though. Let's put it this way, okay? If we were going to do right now, over under Elias Pettersson 30 goals. And I'm not asking, what do you expect? Like, do you think he's going to do it? If he bounces back, he's getting over 30 goals. I don't think Elias Pettersson is going to post 22 goals next year. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Like, if he bounces back and he is recovered from this injury, whatever it was, and he comes back and he is back, why can't Elias Pettersson post 30 goals in a season? He did it 3 straight seasons before this one, and then he came out and posted 15. Like, I don't think there's an in-between. I think it's going to be a significant step forward or really just more of the same. I don't think there's going to be this little, oh, okay, well, he had 45 points last year, but this year he posted 65. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be one or the other.
I think you have to leave all three. You have to be prepared for all three possibilities, that he's the same as he was this year, that it's a middle ground, or that he returns to being like an 80 to 90 point player. I think all those are valid possibilities.
Write it down, Jacob.
I have it written down with the your other predictions. Ryan Donato will get $4 million in free agency, which that actually probably is going to happen.
Yeah, that's probably going to happen.
Gabe Vilardi's next contract will be $6 million or less. And then
wait, you think Gabe Vilardi's signing for less than $6 million?
I don't remember saying that, but I don't know. I stand by it.
It was a while ago, and you told me to write it down. I have a section in my show notes that doesn't get erased at the bottom, where anytime you tell me to write something down, I put it in there. Now we have EP40 either under 60 or over 82 points added to the list.
Can I update my? No, I'm not going to. Whatever.
No, these are not updatable. That's not how this one works.
Okay. All right. Let's get to anyone else. But before we get to anyone else, I got to remind you about Greta's birthday. Greta turns 3 on Saturday, May 24th. On Saturday, May 24th, come celebrate 3 years of Greta with $3 drinks from 8 to 10 p.m. plus a ton of giveaways and surprises throughout the night. Be in the room for your chance at one of 10 VIP Greta experiences this Saturday at Greta, located at 50 West Cordova Street. Let the games begin. Actually, excuse me, that says 1 in 10 VIP Greta experiences. I have no idea what that means, but that verbiage would suggest like 1 in 10 people is going to win, right, Jacob?
Yeah, but I think they just have 10 VIP experiences that they're giving away. So
okay, so 1 of 10. All right, whatever it is, it's going to be a great time. Greta Bar, YVR, 50 West Cordova Street is the address. Make sure you head on down. Saturday, May 24th.
Tomorrow, and $3 drinks. That's a pretty dang good deal, especially in Vancouver.
Oh, yeah. In this economy?
In this economy, $3 drinks, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to anyone else. And a lot of the anyone else's were about stuff we've already been talking about, and we've actually talked about a lot of them. One interesting idea was that if Pettersson bounces back, what does that mean for Jake DeBrusk? Jake DeBrusk, again, 30 goals this year, Harm. Like, does Jake DeBrusk have more in him? Like, Jake DeBrusk wasn't happy with his year when you talked to him at the season end media avails. He came up just short of 30 goals, but that's a 30-goal guy, I think, if PD bounces back. I think that might be a guy who's closer to a point per game, which is what the commenter, I got to find the name. I want to read it. I forgot where it was. I read it earlier and was like, oh, that's interesting. Where'd it go? It might have been Box Van Go. I can't remember. I apologize. But Jake DeBrusk. Yeah. Jake
Conversation. There
it was.
DeBrusk be a point per game player this year if EP40 bounces back.
What would that mean for the Canucks?
Point per game? That
near point per game. He's never been close to it. Like that's the thing we have to remember. Like 82 games for DeBrusk this year, 48 points. Okay. Can he get to 60? Can he get to 7? Can he get to that middle range, Harm, of what we're talking about for Elias Pettersson? I think the answer is yes. If, and again, it's a big if Pettersson bounces back. And when we say bounces back from this point forward, we need to know we're talking about the guy being at a point per game base. He's paid $11.6 million, people. That's what we're talking about. If he bounces back, like that should mean success for Jake DeBrusk. I almost called him Great DeBrusk, but great success is what I meant for Jake DeBrusk.
Yeah, I mean, he scored 28 already. And look, a lot of that was based on the power play. So he would need to get consistent power play one time next season and continue to be productive there, which, hey, new coaching staff, they might have new ideas. You're going to require new forwards this offseason. That's going to be a huge part of it, is making sure the power play production doesn't drop off, because that was kind of inflating his goal totals. But At 5-on-5, yeah, absolutely. Especially off the rush. That's something specifically that DeBrusk cited this year was I didn't feel like I had as many rush goals this season. Well, when Elias Pettersson is at his best, he's a lot more potent off the rush, and DeBrusk needs a centerman who can sort of drive those zone entries. So, yeah, if Pettersson bounces back, DeBrusk at 28 this year, he should be closer to a 30 to 35 goal guy. But I'm not all of a sudden expecting him to be like a 75-point player if that's what people are expecting.
Yeah, and let's also not forget, it was a career high in goals for Jake DeBrusk, so let's give him his flowers as well. But you bring up the rush thing, not to mention that Elias Pettersson, at his core, is a playmaking center, right? So that would be massive, massive for the Canucks. But again, that's one of those few, very few, internal increases I think that the Canucks can at least look for in this home run of an offseason. So I wanted to at least bring that up. Karn in the chat said, give PD a winger like Ehlers and those two will pop off.
Sure, Nick Ehlers would can drive a line on his own. But if they acquire Ehlers, I almost want those guys to drive their own lines. Because this team has a lot of complementary forwards, but not enough like true difference makers that can be the best player on a top 6 line. That's what Nick Ehlers can be. He can be the best player on a top 6 line. He is able to create zone entries on his own. And the point being is if you're paying Pettersson 11.6, you would hope that he's the kind of centerman that can, like, he shouldn't need that like truly elite tier of winger. Like, yeah, if the Canucks had an abundance of options, then yeah, I mean, yeah, it'd be so much fun to watch Pettersson and Ehlers off the rush together. But if they did somehow get lucky and find a way to snag Ehlers, I mean, you're going to try both options. You're going to try him with Pettersson. You're going to try Ehlers on his own line. But chances are your roster construction, they're still going to have a weakness and a shortage of top-end forwards. And so stacking two of, like, your two best ones together, are you going to have enough scoring throughout the rest of your lineup, enough play drivers? I would be a little bit concerned about a scenario where your second line is then just full of predominantly passengers and guys that your second line wouldn't truly be a strength. But yeah, I mean, in another scenario where, of course, this is an unrealistic one where the Canucks had a lot of other options and they somehow got Ehlers, then yeah, Pettersson and Ehlers would be terrific together.
Can I give you another one for perfect offseason for the Canucks? Jonathan Lekkerimäki comes in next year and is not just like a roster player, is a legit top 6 guy, second line, maybe even first line winger, like has earned that role and can play that role for you, bumps guys down your lineup because he's been so good for you. There's one that like that's a real dark horse. That's a real X factor for this Canucks team heading into next year.
Well, that's when we're talking about everything going right. So much of it, we could spend all day talking about potential offseason targets, trade market, free agency, but there are a lot of X factors on this roster as it is, right? You mentioned Lekkerimäki, Nils Höglander as well. We've seen many different variations of him. Dakota Joshua on the back end with some of their defense prospects, Thatcher Demko, Elias Pettersson. Like next season, to some extent, is contingent more on those internal pieces firing again, especially because you're talking about Pettersson, Demko in that conversation. It's more dependent on that than what they do in the offseason. But realistically, they need both if they're going to be a really good team next year. They need to have 99th percentile outcomes, both internally and in terms of their external additions, to get to a level where we look at them and go, all right, this isn't just a team that's squeaking into the playoffs. They're a team that may actually win around and do some damage.
And the funny thing is if you ask me, like these people that are like, oh, why are you giving them a pass? And, why would you be okay with them getting rid of assets to go out and make these trades? Why would you be okay with them trading draft picks and young players? Don't trade the 2026 pick. I'm on board with that. But like we've talked about it and we've talked about it enough. This might be your last kick at the can to convince Quinn Hughes that you've got a vision and that things are going to work out here. You've got to be a playoff team next year. You have to take a meaningful step forward next year. You have to. They have to at least go for it. I know we just said it, 99th percentile outcomes. It's going to be tough. They need some luck. It's not a foregone conclusion even if they make all these moves that they're going to make the playoffs. You need to give it your best shot. You need to give it your best shot at the end of the day. And if you lose Hughes, you're going to be in a rebuild anyway. So who cares if you gave up an asset in 2025? You're going to go gain a bunch more and do an actual rebuild. You hope the conversation doesn't turn into, well, you can't rebuild when Jonathan Lekkerimäki's a first line winger. But yeah, that's why I keep saying, like, you've got to take some swings and you have to go for it. That's their only option, is to go for it. And of course, it sure sounds like they're going to go for it this offseason. I had some news and notes around the league. Did you have anything else you want to say about this topic, Harm, that we're talking about and that we spent most of the show talking about?
No.
Okay. I think we covered it pretty well. The Florida Panthers, I brought them up. We've talked about them in this show, just on another level. I called it last night. I said they were underdogs on Bet365, and we took them. That bet hit in the first period because of Bet365 early payout. If the team goes up by 3 goals, you get your payout early. So another one by me, just absolutely nailed it. Are the Florida Panthers going to sweep the Carolina Hurricanes? I'm thinking it's going to be a gentleman's sweep. It's going to be 5 games.
I mean, either way, the Hurricanes are screwed here. They don't look like they're in the same league as the Panthers right now. And it's wild. They're up to 14 straight losses in conference finals. Like, at some point, you wonder about the psychology of that, and like, do they even believe, like, deep down? Of course, publicly they're going to say they believe they can bounce back, but
sure,
internally, do they really believe that they can take down the Florida Panthers at this stage? And we talk so much about the Leafs playoff failures. I mean, at some point, 14 straight conference final losses. Like, is that really that much better than losing in Game 7 of Round 2 like the Leafs just did?
Well, I mean, that goes back to like 2019. Doesn't it go all the way back to 2009 as well? I think that's a little different because this Leafs run has been like failure in consecutive years. It'd be a little different, I think, if it was the Hurricanes had made the conference final in all of those years and then got swept in all of those years. I think that might make it a little different, but the fact that it's going to be 2 in a row in rapid succession, like, to me, that makes it a conversation at least, but it's not anywhere near what the Leafs have done.
Of course, I think like what saves the Hurricanes from a narrative perspective is they always at least get out of the first round.
Yeah.
Whereas the Leafs, like, that's been the joke, is forever they couldn't get out of the first round. But I mean, that's the point, right? Is the Canes can win one round every year. Sometimes they can win 2, but they can't even win a game once they get to the Final Four. Like, that's tough. And of course, you'd rather have these problems than the problems the Canucks have, where they, like, making the playoffs is a miracle in this city, and then it doesn't happen again for a number of years. Like, any organization would love to have the success that the Hurricanes have had, but man, they just, like, cannot get over the hump, and it doesn't look like that's happening this year either.
Want to hear a Leafs take? Give you my Leafs take.
Yeah, what is it?
Florida needed 7 games to take down the Leafs, and they're making the Hurricanes just look like toddlers out there. So, do the Leafs really need to blow it all up? Resign Mitch Marner, run it back. If they faced the Hurricanes in the second round, Leafs would be in the third round right now, and they'd be giving Florida a run for their money, just like they did in the second round. How different would that narrative be?
Yeah, just give them one more kick, right? Just one more kick, run it back one more time. That'll definitely do it, right, Quads?
Yeah, taking my Brad Marchand hat and putting it out. Speaking of Brad Marchand, best deadline pickup, like Mikko Rantanen, obviously, but Mikko Rantanen with the price tag, what they had to give up to get Brad Marchand, like, that is one of the best additions made at the deadline for sure.
It just felt unfair when they acquired him. To have a forward group that's that stacked. And then here's the thing too, is contending teams, a lot of them will have, like, you go back to even Pittsburgh, and I think that's the first, like, really prominent example where it was like, whoa, that team's so deep. They got Phil Kessel on the third line, but that other third line, it had Bonino and Hagelin, and those were really good players, but they were really good third liners. And the difference maker was, okay, we got a first line caliber guy in Kessel to really like make this an elite third line. But then you look at the Panthers and like Marchand is a legit top 6 guy. Anton Lundell would be a sweet top 6 center anywhere else in the NHL. So you've got 2 of those guys, and then you have an elite third liner on top of that, and Luosterainen. So I mean, to have 2 top 6 like really high caliber top 6 caliber guys on your third line is just it's such a weapon when you then also have game-breaking stars at the top of the lineup.
Yeah. Karn asked this: does Carolina blow it up if they get swept again?
No. They always seem like the type of group that feels like they can tinker and make that one move. And hey, I mean, that, like to some extent, they sort of knew that they didn't have enough because they went out and tried to make that swing for Rantanen. And how different would this team be if they had Mikko Rantanen in terms of that star power element? The year prior, they traded for Jake Gensel and then tried to keep him. Like the issue has been they can't keep the star, guys that they are finally bringing into town. But they're in a fortunate spot. They have a lot of contracts coming off the books. They have a ton of cap space to work with. And the thing about the way the Hurricanes build is they always have like this endless war chest of like B grade prospects in their pipeline that they can leverage to get that Jake Gensel or to go out and get Mikko Rantanen. So I feel like they're just going to keep swinging and swinging to find the next Gensel, find the next Rantanen until they find one that actually is willing to stay.
Jake Gensel was an interesting one. That was more because they didn't have the cap space, right? Like
They did. Gensel just didn't want to resign.
Okay. Because I heard Tulsky talking about this on the sheet shortly after they acquired Mikko Rantanen about how in years past, like free agents weren't staying because they didn't have the money to offer to them. But this wasn't going to be a problem with Rantanen, as you just said, with them having a lot of money come off the books. I thought he was maybe talking about Gensel, but I guess not.
Yeah, I don't think he was. I do remember somewhere, I can't remember where it was, I read where maybe Carolina's didn't step up its offer until like late in the process.
I think that might have been what he was alluding to.
Yeah,
maybe?
but ultimately, I don't think ultimately Gensel didn't sign for a monster cap hit.
Mhm.
It just feels like he wanted to go to Tampa and liked the fit of a team like that more than the fit of a team like Carolina.
Okay, I wanted to get to this as well. Kara Gardner-Murray has been named the first GM of PWHL Vancouver. We didn't talk about this, but earlier in the week, the expansion rules came out for the PWHL. Did you see this? Because all the PWHL fans on my timeline were absolutely up in arms about it because, like, teams are going to lose really good players. And, of course, there's only 6 teams in the PWHL, but the expansion rules are that you can protect 3 players. So, theoretically, 3 players, Harm. You get where I'm going with this.
That's insane.
You're going to lose star players. Like, there are going to be star players that are moving all over the place. And I know there's 2 teams with Seattle and Vancouver, so it's not quite like, Vegas or Seattle. It's just one team coming in and they get their picks. It's going to be 2 teams, so the stars are going to get spread out. But I'm curious what this PWHL Vancouver team is going to look like and just how good they can be because fan bases were really up in arms about it when they saw the rules drop. One thing about the PWHL is I've done more research and read more about the league is that parity has been really important to the league. And I read this today. I think this was in a CBC article about it. But more than half of the league's games have been decided by 1 goal or a shootout. Think about that. More than half of the games, 1 goal or a shootout, and 3 teams finished tied in points in the standings this season. 3 of 6. So like half the league was deadlocked in points to end the season. So there's no Colorado Rockies in the PWHL. And I think that's great. We were talking about what's good for the sport. I think it's great that there's parity. And look, this Vancouver team might be really good. The lists need to get submitted by June 3rd. So we're actually going to have pretty soon an idea of like what players are going to be available for the PWHL Vancouver franchise to choose from. And obviously, look, I might actually go cover that team. You know how I like to stay east of Boundary Road. I never like to go into Vancouver. I can make an exception for the Pacific Coliseum and the Agrodome. So I'll be out there. I'll be out there covering the PWHL Vancouver team. Go check it out. And honestly, just watching a game in the Pacific Coliseum again, I'm most excited for that. But I'm getting off topic. I just want to mention that we have a GM out here, Kara Gardner Mori, named first GM of PWHL Vancouver. And of course, she was the coach of the Princeton women's team, I believe. And they have a good program out there at Princeton.
Yeah, that's awesome. That'll be fun to watch. I mean, Vancouver's getting an expansion team now, so it's easy to look at and go, yeah, love these expansion rules. But of course, if you're a fan of the other teams, you're like, what the hell? We're going to lose our fourth best player. That's actually kind of wild.
Yeah, and did you see what was her name? She was a defenseman on Montreal. Someone in the chat will be able to help me out. I believe her name's Erin Ambrose. Ambrose, yeah. Yeah, okay. So she's on Montreal. Yeah. She had a really, really good post-game interview where she was basically talking about we know this is the last kick at the can with this group because we just saw the expansion rules. They came out earlier in the day and she was reacting to it. And she just said, we know what 3 players, because they have Marie-Philippe Poulin as well in Montreal. She basically said, we know which 3 players are going to get protected. So we know that we're going to get, kind of broken up here. So it was a really cool post-game interview from Erin Ambrose. And hey, I hope she lands in Vancouver. She sounds like she's got a lot of heart. I like that post-game interview. And she is one of the top defensemen in the league as well. But she's going to be a casualty of this where she's going to probably end up, coming to Vancouver or Seattle. But she's going to be one of these players that gets scooped up in the expansion draft.
Yeah, that'll be really fun to keep an eye on.
Okay. Yeah, so I talked about the parity in the league. What else did I have? I had a bunch of notes that I wanted to get to today. Brendan Shanahan's not going to be replaced in Toronto. That doesn't surprise me. I don't like the idea of a president. I like Jim Rutherford, and I like the idea of Jim Rutherford in Vancouver. But if you have a GM as experienced as Brad Treliving, I don't think you need a president to kind of hold his hand, right?
Yeah, it's fine. I was kind of indifferent either way, whether they hired a president of hockey ops or not. It didn't really matter. The interesting thing that Chris Johnson reported was that Keith Pelly had a meeting or had a dinner with Craig Berube, came away from it really impressed. And it sounds like Craig Berube is now going to have more influence in that organization than a typical head coach would. That I find interesting. I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing for the Leafs, but it sounds like that may be part of the reason why they don't feel the need to go out and poach a new director of or president of hockey ops.
Well, with how much they're paying Craig Berube, I would hope he's helping them with hockey ops decisions. Save some money. They don't have to pay for president of hockey ops. But in all seriousness, yeah, I was kind of not hopeful, but I kind of thought, okay, there's no way they're going to replace Brendan Shanahan and put someone else above Brad Treliving.
Also, why hasn't the Panthers front office been raided yet?
Has it been what?
Why hasn't it been raided yet by other teams?
What are you talking about?
The Florida Panthers front office.
I think you said rated. I rate this front office a 9 out of 10.
No.
What are you talking about? Okay.
No, yeah. rated, as in steal some of their guys.
Well, isn't Bill Zito kind of like the ringleader there? Bill
Zito,
Zito,
but they have
he ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, but look at a guy like Sonny Mehta.
Never heard of him.
He's their AGM and head of analytics. I bet you he's had a huge role in finding a lot of those diamonds in the rough.
How do you spell his name?
Sonny, Sunny, and then Mehta.
Oh yeah, I'd hire this guy. Yeah, it's a good question, Harm. Why hasn't it been rated? I rated a 9 out of 10, and I would rate it as well. You know what? Okay, here's something that's interesting to me. It feels like that happens more with coaching staffs than it does managements. Hey?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, this guy's a great assistant coach. I wonder if that's because, okay, who knows anything about the work that's Why are you gonna say, "Oh, Sonny Meta, great guy, yeah, go hire him"? Why are you saying that? Because you think he might be partly responsible for some of those decisions. Whereas with a coach, you go to one of your players and say, "Hey, you were coached by this guy for a season," or word spreads around about players and coaches, and a player's like, "Yeah, I love this guy. This guy would make a great head coach." Whereas, like, if you ask Bill Zito, "Hey, how's Sonny Meta as a AGM?" Like, he's probably not gonna give you an answer. He wants to keep the guy. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I think that's why that happens with coaching staffs more than it does management groups.
Yeah, that's a good theory. It is difficult to know exactly who did what. I actually think, funny enough, Jim Rutherford has had a lot of his assistants like go on to become GMs, right? Fitzgerald, Guerin,
That's because he's the
Botterill.
man. Jim
But it's
Rutherford's the
like
man that
clearly
can never tell a lie.
Yeah, I know. So he's I mean, clearly if you're an AGM that wants to eventually become a GM, just work for Jim Rutherford.
Yeah, Jim Rutherford gets a call. It's like, "Hey, how's this guy doing?" He's like, "Great. He's integral. He couldn't be more valuable to us. We really need him. We really love him. He's gonna be a great GM one day. If I were out there, I'd be hiring him right now as a GM." And then they get hired. It's because Jim Rutherford can't tell a lie. The guy is too honest. I don't want to say that like it's a bad thing. Jim Rutherford is just an honest, hardworking guy, and I respect that. I respect the hell out of Jim Rutherford. Said that a few times, but
Yeah, and I mean,
that's why you get hired.
think about how long it took Matthew Darsh, assistant out in Tampa. We look at Tampa as one of the best front offices in the league. He finally gets that Isles GM job. We were talking about Matthew Darsh as a potential GM candidate when like Rutherford had been hired and the Canucks were looking for a GM around the time, before they hired Alvin. Instead of guys like Darsh getting opportunities, it, a lot of time, look, I shouldn't say a lot of times, but sometimes it is, the Ken Holland types that get another opportunity.
Sure.
But I think it's changing. I think league wide, if you look
You're
at
right.
the number of like first time GMs that are out there, it's changing. There are a lot more first time GMs than there used to be in the league.
And look at all these guys' track records. It's not, played 10 years in the league. Like you bring up Sonny Meta. Like I was looking at him. It's like, he was part of this venture capital firm. It's like, okay. And he's got all these degrees. Eric Tulsky's a scientist, right? You're seeing the resume change a bit as well.
Yeah, which is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Before it used to be disproportionately reliant on playing experience, especially compared to sort of MLB and other major sporting leagues. The NHL is catching up, but it is evolving. But there is still, I think, a bit of a window of opportunity.
Yeah, you're right. What did you want to say about Matthew Darsh? I wanted to talk about him as well. Obviously, as you mentioned, hired by the Islanders. I want to quickly say I hear he's big into rebuilds and he hates Bo Horvat.
He's been like, from what I've seen from other people, because I obviously don't personally know him, but it sounds like in Tampa he was involved with a little bit of everything. A little bit of scouting, pro and amateur, ran the AHL program. He sort of played an integral role in a lot of different areas, as opposed to some AGMs are, I'm just the contract / cap guy. Yeah. I'm just the minor league. Like I handle the minor league affiliate. I just handle the pro and amateur scouting side. Whereas I think Darsh's portfolio was more well-rounded. He obviously comes from an outstanding program in Tampa, and he's got some really interesting decisions to make as far as a future direction for the Islanders.
Yep. It's going to be an interesting one to see. And I mean, before he was even hired, we were talking about that hiring and saying, well, it's going to be interesting to see how much involvement ownership has in that franchise, or how much the GM's going to get to say, okay, we're going to do things differently than we did before. I wanted to quickly say this before we wrap up. Abbotsford Canucks are back in action tonight. As we said yesterday, it's a chance to close it out and advance to the Western Conference Final against the Colorado Eagles. Man, it's going to be a good one tonight. It's going to be a really good game. They've got Jonathan Lekkerimäki starting to come around. Again, we talked about him yesterday, 4 points in his last 2 games. He's been a difference maker, and they're going to need him to be a difference maker again tonight. And a couple friends of the show going to be in action. Victor Mancini and, of course, Max Sasson, the 2 most recent player guests on Canucks Conversation. All right, let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day. Can you bet on the AHL? We're about to find out. Yes, you can. Am I allowed to bet on the Abbotsford Canucks? Holy smokes. They are... Oh, no. Okay, I read the wrong thing. I thought they were like, whoa, these guys are heavy, heavy favorites tonight. They're underdogs tonight. They're underdogs, but only slightly. Right now, it's Colorado Eagles minus 125 and Abbotsford Canucks minus 105. What are we like? What are we thinking, gents? Am I allowed to bet on the Abbotsford Canucks?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
If you're
Yeah, I
wrong,
think
then
so.
just like don't do it again.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have a lead in the series. They can afford one game of a quads jinx.
Ooh, actually, sorry, Abbotsford Canucks. Maybe not sorry because I'm not going to jinx the Abbotsford Canucks because typically when I bet on a team that is named the Canucks, they end up losing. So I'm going to go with the Edmonton Oilers tonight because the Oilers are underdogs. And yeah, they lose game ones. It's part of their identity. They lose game ones. But you know what else they do a lot? Win game twos. And that's exactly what they're going to do tonight. You can get the Edmonton Oilers, the underdog Oilers, at minus 105 odds to take down the Dallas Stars on home ice. Are those Stars? So I'm taking Oilers minus 105. You can get the money line over at Bet365. And if you want to get in on the action for the Stanley Cup playoffs, Bet365's got you covered from game props, player props, totals, and the money line. You can even bet on futures like series winners, conference champions, the Stanley Cup champions, and much, much more. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get in on the game. An official partner in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. Oh, I also missed the C's read for anyone else, and I'm excited to tell everybody about the Vancouver Canadians. That was a miss by me. The C's are on the road this week in Eugene, but they're going to return next Tuesday for a 6-game home set with Hillsborough. Celebrate on Tuesday the 27th for South Asian Heritage Night, plus post-game fireworks. There's also a nooner at the Dad on Friday the 30th. Get out of work early, grab some friends, and check out the White Spot Family Fun Sunday on June 1st. You can bring the kids. There will be a Bob Brown Bear Stuffy giveaway, and the kids get to run the bases post-game. It's always a fun day on a Sunday afternoon at the ballpark. For tickets, call 604-872-5232 or check out CanadiansBaseball.com. All right, we're going to close it out there. Have a good weekend, folks. No show Monday, but we will be back on Tuesday. For my co-host, Harmon Dial, and our technical producer, Jacob Bazar, my name is Dave Wuccelli. Thanks so much for this episode of Canucks Conversation.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.